The rain was falling softly as I stood over my father's casket, the last of my family. His face looked peaceful, unlike the turmoil in my heart. 15 years of marriage to Sarah, 2 beautiful children, and a life I thought was built on love and trust. I never imagined this moment would be the one to shatter everything. As the pastor finished speaking, Sarah approached me with an envelope. "Your family fortune is legally mine now," she smirked, handing me divorce papers. My children refused to even look at me. "We're changing our last name to stepdads," they announced coldly. "You're dead to us anyway." I nodded silently and walked away. If you've ever felt betrayed by those closest to you, hit subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Let me know if you would have handled this differently, because what happened next changed everything. I come from a middle-class family in Portland, where both my parents taught me the value of hard work. My father started a small logistics company when I was just a kid, working 16-hour days to build something from nothing. I admired him for his dedication and integrity. He always told me, "Adrian, wealth can be built, but character is earned through your actions." I met Sarah during my sophomore year at Oregon State. She was studying business like me, and we connected instantly over our shared ambitions and values. At least what I thought were shared values. She was beautiful, intelligent, and seemed to appreciate the simple things. On our first date, we skipped an expensive restaurant and instead had a picnic by the river. She told me she valued experiences over material things. I fell hard and fast. After graduation, we married in a modest ceremony with close friends and family. My father gave a toast. I still remember marriage is like business. It takes work every day, but the rewards are worth every effort. Sarah and I took those words to heart. The early years were challenging. We lived in a small apartment, worked entry-level jobs, and pinched pennies. Sarah never complained, though. She supported my decision to join my father's company, even though the starting salary was lower than other offers I had. "We're building something together," she would say. Short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. When Tyler was born 2 years later, our tiny apartment felt even smaller. Melissa came along 2 years after that. Sarah became a full-time mom while I worked alongside my father, learning every aspect of the business. Those years were exhausting but fulfilling. I would come home late to find Sarah waiting up for me, eager to hear about my day. The turning point came when I turned 32. My father promoted me to COO, and suddenly our financial situation changed dramatically. The company had grown exponentially, and my compensation reflected that. We bought our first house, then a vacation property. We upgraded our cars and took luxury vacations. Looking back, I should have noticed the changes in Sarah sooner. The woman who once loved picnics by the river now insisted on dining at the most exclusive restaurants. Shopping became her favorite hobby, and her friends changed. The women she started spending time with were all married to wealthy men, and their conversations revolved around status symbols. "The Wilsons just bought a yacht," she mentioned one night over dinner. "It would be nice to entertain business associates on something like that." I laughed it off. "Dad always says boats are holes in the water you throw money into." She did not laugh with me. Our children were also changing. Tyler, now a teenager, began asking for expensive gadgets and designer clothes. Melissa wanted riding lessons at the most exclusive stable in the area. When I suggested alternatives, they would reply with variations of, "But Jordan's parents bought him one," or "Ashley's family has two." I tried talking to Sarah about how we were raising entitled children, but she dismissed my concerns. "They need to fit in with their peers. Do you want them to be social outcasts?" Around this time, James Sullivan entered our lives. He owned a competing logistics company, though his was 3 times the size of ours. We first met him at a charity gala Sarah had insisted we attend. I noticed immediately how his eyes lingered on my wife, and how she seemed to stand straighter, laugh louder in his presence. "James has invited us to his lake house next weekend," Sarah announced a few days later. "His annual summer party is apparently the event of the season. I had planned to take the kids fishing that weekend. I have to work," I lied, uncomfortable with the idea of socializing with a competitor. "Fine. The kids and I will go without you." That became a pattern. Sarah attending events without me, often with the children in tow. James appeared in more and more conversations. James says this, or James thinks that. I told myself it was nothing, just a harmless friendship. Then my father got sick. The diagnosis was grim, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him 6 months, but my father, stubborn as always, was determined to prove them wrong. I spent every spare moment with him, taking him to treatments, handling business matters, so he could focus on fighting. Sarah's response was telling. "You cannot neglect your family for your father," she said one night after I missed Melissa's dance recital. "The kids need you too. Dad is dying." I replied, shocked at her lack of empathy. "We are living," she countered coldly. My children grew increasingly distant. They were 14 and 12 now, old enough to understand what was happening, but young enough to be easily influenced. Sarah did nothing to encourage their relationship with their grandfather. In fact, she scheduled activities that conflicted with hospital visits and made excuses for why they could not accompany me. During one of my father's more lucid days, about 2 months before the end, he called me to his bedside while Sarah was out shopping with the kids. "Adrian," he said, his once strong voice, now a whisper, "I need to talk to you about the business, about the family assets. Dad, save your strength. We can discuss this when you are stronger." He gripped my hand with surprising force. "No, it has to be now. I have been watching, listening. Things are not right with Sarah." I tried to protest, but he continued. "Call Thomas tomorrow," he said, referring to our family attorney. "Tell him I said to initiate protocol safeguard. He will understand." I nodded, more to comfort him than anything else. I did not take his warning seriously enough. As his condition deteriorated, Sarah's absences grew longer and more frequent. The children stopped asking about their grandfather altogether. When he passed away 5 months after his diagnosis, I felt utterly alone in my grief. The morning of the funeral was gray and drizzly. Sarah and the children were distant, going through the motions of support without any real empathy. They rode to the cemetery in a separate car, which struck me as odd, but I was too grief-stricken to question it. I delivered the eulogy with a steady voice, despite my breaking heart, sharing stories of my father's kindness, his business acumen, his unwavering moral compass. As I spoke, I noticed James Sullivan sitting in the back row. I had not invited him. When my eyes met Sarah's questioningly, she quickly looked away. After the service, as people were offering condolences, I saw Thomas, our attorney, watching Sarah and James with narrowed eyes. Before I could approach him, Sarah was suddenly beside me, an envelope in her manicured hand. "I am sorry it has to be today," she said, without a hint of actual remorse. "But I figured one funeral might as well cover 2 deaths. Then she handed me the envelope containing divorce papers. As I stood there in shock, my children approached, flanking their mother protectively. "Your family fortune is legally mine now," she smirked loud enough for nearby mourners to hear. "The prenup is invalid since your father transferred most assets to you after we were married. Community property laws are quite clear." My son Tyler, who had my father's eyes, could not meet my gaze. "We are changing our last name to James's," he mumbled. "Melissa, my little girl, who used to beg me for bedtime stories, added, "You are dead to us anyway. You were never really there." The betrayal was complete. My family had died twice in 1 week. I will never forget the feeling of standing there, divorce papers in hand, surrounded by funeral flowers, watching my family walk away with another man. The physical sensation was like being plunged into ice water. I could not breathe. I could not move. I simply stood there, papers clutched in my trembling hand, as mourners pretended not to notice the spectacle. Thomas, my father's attorney, and my godfather approached me cautiously. "Adrian," he said quietly, "I saw what happened. Are you all right?" It was such an absurd question that I nearly laughed. All right. My father was dead. My wife had just served me divorce papers at his funeral. My children had disowned me. I was about as far from all right as a person could be. "I need to get out of here," I managed to say. "Of course. But Adrian, we need to talk. Soon. Your father." He trailed off, glancing around. "Not here. Come to my office tomorrow morning." "First thing." I nodded mechanically, not really registering his words. All I could focus on was escaping the pitying glances of funeral guests. I handed the keys to the limo driver and asked him to take me home. As we pulled away, I caught a glimpse of Sarah, the children, and James walking to his Bentley, looking for all the world like a perfect family. The drive home was a blur. Rain streaked the windows, matching the tears I finally allowed to fall. 15 years of marriage, the birth of 2 children, countless shared moments, dreams, plans for the future. All of it had been a lie. Or perhaps it had been true in the beginning and had warped over time as wealth corrupted what we had built. When I arrived at our house, the silence was oppressive. I wandered from room to room like a ghost. Sarah had clearly been preparing for this moment. Closets were half empty. Certain photographs and mementos were missing. In the kitchen, I found a note detailing which items she would be sending movers to collect later in the week. In the family room, I found something that broke me completely. Our wedding album was open on the coffee table. Every photo that featured me prominently had been removed. Only images where I was in the background, or could be easily cropped, remained. It was as if Sarah was methodically erasing me from our family history. I sank onto the couch, the album in my lap, and finally allowed myself to completely break down. The sobs tore from my chest with such force they felt like physical wounds. I cried for my father, for my failed marriage, for my children who had been turned against me. I cried until there was nothing left. As the evening deepened into night, my phone rang. It was Thomas. I almost did not answer, but something in my father's final warning echoed in my mind. Adrian, I know today has been hell, but you need to come to my office first thing tomorrow. Your father anticipated something like this. Not the exact timing, perhaps, but the situation. He made preparations. Do not contact Sarah or the children. Do not discuss anything financial. Just come see me tomorrow. The urgency in his voice penetrated my fog of grief. I will be there, I promised. That night I slept in the guest room, unable to face the master bedroom Sarah and I had shared. Sleep came in fitful bursts, punctuated by nightmares where I was falling through darkness while my family watched impassively from above. The next morning I arrived at Thomas's office building before the receptionist. He must have been watching for me because he buzzed me in immediately. He looked as though he had not slept either. Coffee, he offered, leading me into his private office. I just need answers, I replied. Thomas nodded, gesturing for me to sit. He opened a drawer and withdrew a thick file labeled simply, Safeguard. Your father came to me about 3 years ago, he began. He had concerns about Sarah, about her changing attitudes toward money, about some of her new friendships. He asked me to quietly monitor the situation. Monitor how Thomas looked uncomfortable. He hired a private investigator. At first it was just to ease his mind. He hoped to be proven wrong. My stomach clenched. But he wasn't wrong. No. Thomas confirmed, opening the file. About 2 years ago, the investigator found evidence that Sarah had begun an affair with James Sullivan. He slid several photographs across the desk. I forced myself to look at them. Sarah and James entering a hotel together. Sarah and James intimately entwined at his lake house. The timestamps showed a relationship spanning years, not months. There's more, Thomas continued. Your father suspected that Sarah was positioning herself to claim a significant portion of the family wealth in the event of a divorce. He began making preparations to protect you, and by extension, his legacy. What kind of preparations? Complex ones. On paper, you appear to control the family fortune as his sole heir. In reality, your father restructured everything. The visible assets, the ones Sarah knows about, represent perhaps 10% of your actual wealth. My mind was reeling. I do not understand. How is that possible? Your father established a series of trusts, offshore accounts, and shell companies. The real estate holdings, the business interests, the investment portfolios. They are all protected in various legal structures that Sarah cannot touch. The prenuptial agreement you signed was actually a decoy. Your father had me create a much more comprehensive asset protection plan that would activate upon his death. Why did he not tell me? He wanted to, but he was concerned about putting you in a difficult position. He knew you loved Sarah and the children. He worried that if you knew, you might inadvertently reveal something. He made me promise to explain everything, if and when it became necessary. Thomas pulled out another folder, this one containing text messages and emails obtained through digital forensics. They revealed a calculated conspiracy between Sarah and James. Their plan had been simple. Wait until my father died, then divorce me, and claim half of what they believed was the family fortune. James had been coaching Sarah on how to maximize her settlement. They had even discussed strategies for turning the children against me. One text exchange particularly gutted me. Sarah A's spending all his time at hospital again. Kids are upset. James perfect. Keep reinforcing that he's choosing his father over them. Sarah Tyler already told me he hates how A is never there for his games. James, when the divorce happens, they'll choose you. And with them comes leverage for a bigger settlement. There were dozens of such exchanges, each more calculating than the last. They had been meticulously grooming my children to resent me, exploiting my dedication to my dying father as a weapon against me. "There's something else you should know," Thomas said gently. "The mansion where Sarah is currently staying with the children and James. It's actually owned by one of your father's shell corporations. The irony is that they are celebrating in a house that you actually control." A strange calm was settling over me. The shock and grief were still there, but now they were joined by a cold clarity. "What do I do now?" "That depends on what you want. If you wish to contest custody, these materials would certainly help your case. However, my children have made their feelings clear," I finished for him. "They want nothing to do with me." "They have been manipulated," Thomas reminded me. "They are victims in this too." I nodded, though the rational understanding did little to ease the pain of their rejection. "What about the assets? The house they are in now? Legally, you could evict them immediately. All the documentation is ready. But your father suggested an alternative approach. Let them believe they have won temporarily. Let them celebrate. Then reveal the truth when they least expect it." The idea had a certain poetic justice to it. How long? A week should be sufficient. "My sources tell me they are planning a housewarming party this Sunday. A rather tasteless celebration considering your father's recent passing." For the first time since the funeral, I felt a flicker of something other than despair. Not quite hope, but purpose. "Prepare everything," I told Thomas. "I want to be there when they learn the truth." Over the next week, I stayed in a hotel while Sarah and the children moved into the mansion with James. Through social media posts, they did not realize I witnessed their gleeful celebration of their new life. Expensive shopping sprees, lavish dinners, the children showing off new gadgets and clothing. Melissa posted a picture with a caption that read, "So happy to finally have a dad who puts family first." Tyler shared a video of James teaching him to drive a new sports car, commenting, "Upgrade in every way possible." Each post was a fresh wound, but I forced myself to look, to remember, to strengthen my resolve. Thomas kept me updated on the legal proceedings. Everything was in place. On Sunday evening, as their housewarming party reached its peak, he would deliver the documents revealing the truth. I watched from a distance as caterers and guests arrived at the mansion. Music and laughter drifted across the manicured lawn. Through the large windows I could see Sarah holding court in a designer dress, James at her side playing the generous host. My children moved through the crowd of strangers, soaking up compliments and attention. At precisely 9 o'clock, Thomas arrived at the front door. The party was in full swing when Thomas rang the doorbell. Through my earpiece connected to the microphone he wore, I could hear the ambient sounds of laughter and clinking glasses. The catering staff had been instructed to serve the Dom Perignon champagne at exactly 8:30 p.m., ensuring everyone would be in high spirits when the moment of truth arrived. "Mr. Sullivan, residence," a butler answered. I recognized him as our former household staff, evidently hired away by James. "I am here to see Mrs. Preston," Thomas stated formally. "I have important legal documents that require her immediate attention." There was a pause, then Sarah's voice slightly slurred from champagne. "Thomas, what a surprise. Come to congratulate us on our new home. May I come in?" "This is a matter of some delicacy." From my vantage point in a car across the street, I watched Thomas enter the mansion. The microphone continued to transmit, allowing me to hear what transpired inside. "Everyone," Sarah's voice announced, "this is Thomas, Adrian's lawyer. Probably here with the final surrender papers, right?" Thomas' polite laughter followed. I could picture her smug expression, the victory she thought was hers. "Actually, Mrs. Preston, I am here representing the Kingsley Family Trust. I have several documents that require your immediate acknowledgement." "The what?" Sarah's voice had lost its confidence. "Perhaps we could speak privately," Thomas suggested. "Anything you have to say can be said in front of James and our guests," Sarah replied defiantly. "We have no secrets here." "Very well. As you wish." Thomas's voice was calm, professional. "I am here to inform you that pursuant to the terms of the Kingsley Family Trust established 5 years ago by the late Jonathan Kingsley, you are currently occupying property that legally belongs to the trust. Furthermore, the vehicles in the driveway, the artwork on the walls, and substantially all assets you believe to be subject to your divorce proceedings are in fact trust property and not marital assets." There was a moment of stunned silence. That is ridiculous, James sputtered. Adrian inherited everything, and as his wife Sarah is entitled to half. That is a common misconception, Thomas continued smoothly. Mr. Preston did indeed inherit his father's estate. However, what was widely known as the Kingsley fortune was in fact a relatively small portion of the family's holdings. The bulk of the assets, including the controlling interest in Kingsley Logistics, 14 commercial properties, 7 residential properties including this mansion, and the investment portfolio valued at approximately $600 million, are all held in irrevocable trusts established well before Mr. and Mrs. Preston's marriage. Another silence, this one longer and heavier. "You are lying," Sarah finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Page 16 of the document details the ownership structure of this particular property," Thomas replied. "You will also find attached the prenuptial agreement Mrs. Preston actually signed, which differs substantially from the document presented in her divorce filing." "Let me see that," James demanded. I could imagine them huddled over the paperwork, the party guests watching in confused silence, the celebration atmosphere evaporating. "There is more," Thomas continued after giving them a moment to absorb the initial shock. "Page 24 contains evidence gathered by a licensed private investigator documenting Mrs. Preston's extramarital affair with Mr. Sullivan beginning approximately 26 months ago. Page 30 contains transcripts of text messages between Mrs. Preston and Mr. Sedimus Sullivan discussing their plan to, quote, maximize the divorce settlement after the old man kicks it, unquote. Gasps from the party guests. The public humiliation Sarah had inflicted on me at my father's funeral was now being returned tenfold. "This is a violation of privacy," Sarah shouted. "You cannot use those." Actually, all communications were obtained legally through devices owned by Kingsley Enterprises and subject to the company's acceptable use policy, which Mrs. Preston acknowledged annually as part of her authorized user agreement for family devices. More silence. Given the documented infidelity and conspiracy to commit fraud, Thomas continued relentlessly. The prenuptial agreement's fidelity clause has been triggered, limiting Mrs. Preston's settlement to personal items she owned prior to the marriage, plus a one-time payment of $50,000. This cannot be legal, James protested weakly. "I assure you, Mr. Sullivan, every aspect has been thoroughly vetted by our legal team. You are welcome to challenge it in court, but I should inform you that the trust has allocated $12 million specifically for legal defense against such challenges." The sound of breaking glass came through the microphone. Someone had dropped their champagne flute. "You have 48 hours to vacate this property," Thomas concluded. "A reasonable allowance has been made for the children's personal belongings. Mrs. Preston, a studio apartment has been arranged for you until you secure your own housing. The address is included in the documentation." "Where is—" Adrian Sarah demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "Is he too much of a coward to deliver this news himself?" "Mr. Preston felt his presence might be disruptive to the children," Thomas replied diplomatically. "He requested that I handle this matter professionally." At that moment my phone rang. It was Melissa. I declined the call. Seconds later it rang again, and again. Finally I answered. "Dad." Her voice was choked with tears. "How could you do this? How could you hide all this from us?" It was the first time she had called me Dad in months, yet there was no joy in it, only accusation. "I did not hide anything, Melissa. Your grandfather protected what he built. What did you expect would happen when you and Tyler decided I was dead to you? We did not mean it. We were upset and confused," and Mom said, "I know exactly what your mother said." I cut her off. "I have read the texts. I have seen the evidence of how you were turned against me, while I cared for your dying grandfather. You made a choice, Melissa. You chose a side. Now you get to live with the consequences of that choice." "Dad, please," she begged. "Where are we supposed to go? What about school and our friends? You should discuss that with your mother and James. They seemed to have all the answers a week ago." "James just left," she cried. "As soon as he saw the papers, he grabbed his keys and walked out. He is not answering Mom's calls." Of course he had. James had wanted my money, not the responsibility of raising my children. Without the fortune he had expected, Sarah and the kids were just liabilities to him. "Dad, I am sorry," Melissa sobbed. "I am so, so sorry." We did not understand. Choices have consequences, Melissa. That is a lesson your mother never taught you. I am teaching it now. I ended the call, as she continued to plead. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Over the next few days, I received dozens of calls and messages from both children and Sarah. I responded to none of them. Thomas handled all communication regarding the logistics of their moving out and the formal settlement arrangements. 2 weeks later, I agreed to meet Tyler at a coffee shop. He looked thinner, his eyes shadowed with new understanding of how quickly life can change. "I messed up," were his first words. "I betrayed you when you needed me most." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You did. I do not expect you to forgive me," he continued, voice cracking. "But I want you to know I am ashamed of what I did, of what I said. James and Mom, they kept telling us how you didn't care about us, how all your time with Grandpa was you choosing him over us. It made sense when they said it, but now I see they were manipulating us." I studied my son's face, seeing echoes of my father in his features. Manipulation only works when there is something in you willing to be manipulated, Tyler. You were eager to believe the worst of me, because it justified your own resentment. You wanted the fancy cars and the status James offered. He flinched, but did not deny it. I was stupid. You were 14 and easily influenced. But you are old enough to know right from wrong, to understand loyalty and honor. "Is there any way I can make it right?" he asked, tears streaming down his face. I considered his question carefully. "That depends on what you want. If you are just hoping I will restore your comfortable lifestyle, then no. But if you genuinely want to rebuild our relationship to learn from this experience, then perhaps over time." "I want my dad back," he said simply. "I never left Tyler. You did." We talked for another hour. About his sister who was struggling to adjust to their new circumstances. About Sarah who had moved in with a friend after the apartment lease ended. About his new school, less prestigious than his previous one. About his regrets and hopes. When we parted, I gave him my new address and told him he could visit on Sundays if he wished. It was a small opening, but an opening nonetheless. Melissa took longer. She had been closer to her mother, more deeply enmeshed in the deception. When we finally met a month later, her anger had not fully subsided. "You could have helped us," she accused. "Instead, you let us lose everything. You lost material things, Melissa. Things you never earned in the first place. Perhaps now you will understand what truly matters." "Is this punishment supposed to make us love you again?" she asked bitterly. "This is not punishment. It is reality. Actions have consequences. I did not create this situation. Your mother and James did with your willing participation." It was a difficult conversation full of tears and recriminations. But by the end, there was a fragile thread of understanding between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but potential. As for Sarah, I spoke to her only through attorneys. The divorce was finalized quickly given the evidence and the prenuptial provisions. She attempted various legal challenges to the trust structure, but as Thomas had predicted, they were unsuccessful. I moved to a new home, smaller but comfortable, and began rebuilding my life. I took a more active role in the company my father had built, honoring his legacy by maintaining his ethical standards and business philosophy. Slowly, I started to heal. Tyler began visiting regularly. Our relationship, while changed forever, grew stronger through honest conversation. Melissa's visits were less frequent, but gradually increased. They both understood now that love is not measured in material gifts or grand gestures, but in consistent presence and unwavering support, the very things they had once accused me of failing to provide. One Sunday, about 6 months after that fateful funeral day, Tyler asked me about the business. It was the first time he had shown any interest. "Grandpa built something amazing," he said. "I never really appreciated it before. Would you like to learn?" I offered. "Not to take over necessarily, but to understand." He nodded eagerly. "I want to know what was important to both of you." That afternoon, I showed him the basics of logistics management. As we worked, I realized my father had given me one final gift, the chance to teach my son about integrity, perseverance, and the true meaning of wealth. True wealth, I now understand, is not measured in dollars or properties. It is found in relationships built on trust in work, done with purpose in legacy that transcends material possessions. My father knew this. In protecting his financial legacy, he gave me the opportunity to discover the more important legacy of values and character. I often wonder, would you have made the same choices I did? Would you have allowed your children to face the consequences of their actions even when it broke your heart to do so? Would you have found the strength to set boundaries with people who betrayed you, even when they were family? These are not easy questions, and there are no perfect answers. But I believe that true family is built on choices and actions, not just blood. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more experiences that might help you navigate your own challenging relationships. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do. Leave a comment below about how you have handled betrayal in your life. Did you forgive, forget, or set boundaries? Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the most valuable inheritance is not what is in your bank account but what is in your heart.